Hello everyone, this is your girl from Brown Girl Table Talk, Erica L. I'm currently with Mr. Antoine Marshall, an attorney in the Wake County area. He's going to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, what we do. I'm excited to have him on today. He's actually going to share a wealth of information. It's a great pleasure to be in his presence right now. So, Antoine.
Thank you, Erica. My name is Antoine Marshall. I was born in the D.C. area, but I've been a Raleigh native for the past 20 years. I went to college. We share the same alma mater, Claflin University.
Claflin University.
Orangeburg, South Carolina,
Yes.
1869, oldest HBCU in the state of South Carolina.
Yes.
After I graduated from Claflin, when I was at Claflin, I did 2 internships on Capitol Hill. Fell in love with politics, fell in love with policy, fell in love with the law. Decided that's what I wanted to do with my career. So after I left Claflin, I went to Wake Forest School of Law. And after I graduated, I decided to apply my skills back at home and serving my community. So for 5 years after graduating, I was an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina, focused mainly in housing. Mortgage foreclosures, landlord-tenant law, subsidized housing. I did some community economic development work with them as far as disaster relief.
Okay.
And also kind of community building, how we build affordable housing in neighborhoods, especially our inner city neighborhoods. Currently, I own and operate my own firm, the law office of Antoine G. Marshall,
Okay.
where I specialize in landlord-tenant law, bankruptcy, estate planning, and I'm actually getting ready to start a venture for people who have had property damage because of Hurricane Florence.
Okay.
If they are trying to settle some of their insurance claims, we can step in and assist them as well.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
So I'm trying to do
Quite
what I
a
can.
few that, from my understanding, having that difficulty resolving.
Yeah, I think that we tend to have this idea that after the storm passes, everything's okay, just because it hasn't impacted us. But there's still a lot of families out there, who, not just Florence, but even Hurricane Matthew, who are, even though that was over 2 years ago, who are still rebuilding, especially out in the eastern part of North Carolina.
Okay, absolutely. Well, with Antoine sharing with him what he does, we have him on Brown Girl Table Talk today just to share a little bit about Intune. We've kind of discussed this beforehand, of course, but I have a lot of listeners giving me feedback in regards to what's going on in Wake County, what's to know, what's not to know as far as law-wise. And Antoine is going to share some of his thoughts and some of his interactions that he's had on the political standpoint. Of course, we're up 2020 election for president, but actually this past year was very strategic for all states and counties, and there's a lot of county elections
Municipal
that are
elections are coming up in 2019. So
Yes.
that's one thing that. So to those
Share with that.
So
with us,
those
please.
listeners who live in North Carolina, if you are living in a municipality, any of the cities, you will have elections either in October or November of 2019. I don't know why they schedule them differently. So like Raleigh and Cary are in October, but then like if you're in Apex, Wendell, and it's in November, I have no idea why they do that, but
I think it's to throw people off.
it could be. It could very well be. But so those elections are coming up in 2019. And our city, we've had some challenges. I mean, there's definitely some positive aspects as far as what's been going on in Raleigh. I mean, I think that the amount of economic growth and the things that we see in Raleigh have been outstanding for the past decade, 2 decades or so. I know that I said, I was born in the D.C. area and I came down here 20 years ago, and part of the reason why my family moved us down here was because of some of the things that Wake County and Raleigh had going on when it came to small businesses, when it came to the schooling system. We had one of the best school systems in the country, and I still think that we're among one of the top school districts in the country, thanks to some of the policies that the Wake County School Board has passed, especially in the busing. But with a lot of that growth, there does exist challenges.
Right.
And some of the challenges, and like I said, my background is primarily in housing, and seeing the changing to the housing market and what that's doing as far as gentrification.
Okay.
I think that the city really needs to take some affirmative steps in order to try to solve some of those issues.
Okay.
So I mean, in Wake County, I think the last estimates, they said there were about 57 people moving to Wake County every day.
Right.
So when you come to that, I mean, as far as they're coming here because of the jobs, they're coming here because of the growth, they're coming here because of the great schools, but it does put a burden on our infrastructure.
Okay.
You know, that's why we're seeing more traffic.
Right.
That's why, you know, some of us, you know, I do believe that the Wake County Public School System, they're building at least one new school for the next decade, and it's still not keeping up with growth.
Okay.
So, you know, you come into an issue of where do you get the land for all the schools.
Okay.
I was talking to a school board member, and they were basically saying that all the new land that they buy for schools, they can't be in the municipality because there's just not enough land.
Okay.
So all of them are kind of in the unincorporated areas. You know, they're not in Raleigh, they're not in Cary, they're just kind of in Wake County.
Right.
You know, because that's where the land is. Because there's some, you know, restrictions as far as, you know, how many continuous acres you need to buy. You just can't find, you know, 30 continuous acres in Raleigh.
Okay.
It just doesn't happen.
I think they're building a school not far from here. Actually, I think it's going to be Southeast Elementary.
Yes. Yeah, right down Rockport Road.
Yes.
So that's one of the things where they're.
And it's going to be a magnet school, by the way.
It is a magnet school. It's in a partnership with the YMCA, Wake County School Board. There's supposed to be affordable housing there. There's supposed to be the YMCA there. There's supposed to be, I mean, it's supposed to be kind of its own community.
Wow.
Which I think that, you know, Raleigh needs to do more of. If we're going to try to solve some of the traffic problems, we need to build these, you know, we need to build communities in which, you know, someone can work, shop, play, and live all in those same communities. Because, you know, I've got to get on the highway and drive down to North Hills, and everybody has to do that, then there's more traffic on the road. Right. But if I can find some of those same things in my community, you know, you kind of reduce the traffic.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, as Raleigh continues to build, I think another thing that we need to focus on is making sure that we do more infilling. One of the differences you see in cities in the north and cities in the south, cities in the north are pretty packed together. Like, there's not a lot of land.
Right.
And they tend to build up and not out. And in the south, we've had this history of, you know, there's a lot of land, you know, former agricultural communities.
Right.
You know, when we build, it was kind of out. We had these suburbs, and, you know, you look at the land mass.
Yes, absolutely.
There's just so much space that, you know, everybody gets 2 acres of land, you know, to have a yard and all. And when you look at what that kind of footprint that builds, you just don't have a sustainable city that can grow.
Wow.
So I think one of the challenges that, you know, we need to realize as Raleigh, because I think a lot of the long-term residents here, they still kind of see us as that sleepy suburb, southern town.
Yes.
Where at the same time, we're growing into a modern 21st century metropolitan city, and the two just can't exist. So I think you're seeing a lot of pushback from, you know, those old neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods, saying, you know,
we don't want that.
Yeah, we want the growth, but we just don't want to change how we do things.
Right.
And not, you know, hey, we need to get with, you know, basically the realities that we're facing.
Right.
And that house with the 2 acres of land, that really needs to be, you know, you really need to be able to put about 4 houses on that lot.
Right. That's the reality.
And that's the reality. And I think that that's another part that we see with the gentrification going on.
Okay.
You know, I think gentrification is kind of one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around. Same thing with affordable housing.
And that's what I was going to ask with you, dealing with the affordable housing. I know with the process that Wake County is going through, so many families are, the stories that we get, that families are suffering and they don't really have anywhere to go. They're saying they have to be out by a certain time, but there's really no guidance. You know, so is Housing Authority responsible for leading them in that direction, or?
Not necessarily just the Housing Authority. I mean, it really is a city and a county-wide problem. The Housing Authority can do certain things, especially with subsidized housing. So Section 8 vouchers, public housing, like that's under the Housing Authority's purview.
Right.
Trying to make sure that landlords aren't discriminating against tenants, like that's under the Housing Authority. But when it comes to how we design our cities in order to increase our housing stock, that really falls on zoning and planning, and that goes to the city and county level.
Wow.
So, you know, what, like the gentrification of affordable housing, those are kind of buzzwords that get thrown around, but when you actually look like the definitions of what they are, the federal government defines affordable housing as 30% of a household's income level.
Okay.
So, anything beyond that, they classify you as housing burden. But in order for the housing to be affordable, it has to be 30% of your annual household, you know, your monthly household income. And so what they define as affordable really does depend on the area. Because then, so then you start getting into, well, what's low income affordable?
Okay.
And what they classify as low income is 80% of what the area median income is. So whatever the average of, they kind of break it down based off of census and geographical area and say the average, let's just say the average household in Raleigh is $60,000 a year.
Okay.
And so when you break that down, if I do my math correctly, that should be about $5,000 a month.
Right.
And so they're saying, well, 80% of that $5,000 is $4,000 a month.
Right.
So if you are a family and a household making $48,000 a year, you're classified as low income. And they're saying 30% of that income should go towards housing. Anything below that is affordable. So you can have affordable housing that rents at $1,200, $1,500 a month, depending on where you live. I mean, in DC, it's crazy.
Yes.
Because in DC, you can rent a place for $1,800 a month, and that's still affordable.
Right.
But then when you think about, when we think about affordable housing, people who need affordable housing, $48,000, that's a lot of money. I mean, when I worked at Legal Aid, we were getting families who were living off of $10,000, $11,000 a year.
Right.
And so, the idea they're going to spend $1,200 a month in rent.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just not feasible, but it's classified as affordable housing.
Wow.
And so I think so that's one problem, is that the definition is very, very loose, and it becomes a very political buzzword. We're going to increase the affordable housing stock, but if we're building, $1,500 a month apartments, we're still missing those families that you talked about who are getting put out and living in hotels.
Right.
They can't afford $1,500 a month.
Right.
But you've got, city council, county commission saying, hey, we're building affordable housing, but it's still not to the targeted group.
Right.
So I think that we need to kind of reassess how we do affordable housing.
Okay.
Now, with gentrification, the thing that people miss about gentrification is that it's kind of a natural progress of economic development.
Right.
So, example, if I'm renting a place for, let's just say, $1,000 a month, and then all of a sudden they built the Red Hat Amphitheater, a mile away,
right,
and I can charge, $1,800 a month. As a landlord, I'm going to do that. And I can't fault the landlord for that. That doesn't mean
that's their money.
Yeah. You're going to charge $1,800. The person who lives there, they haven't gotten an $800 a month boost. So they end up being pushed out.
Right.
And so I think as you see Raleigh growing, you see the downtown area growing. I mean, we came here 20 years ago. Downtown, there was nothing downtown, but now the downtown has all of these things.
Right.
It's growing, all these new apartments are popping up. The problem is that the people who normally live there can't live there anymore, and they end up being displaced.
Okay.
And so the gentrification is kind of the forced displacement of it. It'd be one thing these individuals said, I'm okay with moving, like, I don't want to be here anymore, this place is getting too big, there's too much traffic, I'm leaving.
There's other places that I can actually go.
Yeah, like if they chose to leave, that'd be one thing, but when you have people, and so it really affects individuals who are kind of vulnerable to increase in price. So older individuals who are on a fixed income.
Okay.
Especially, that goes to renters and homeowners.
Right.
Because if your property taxes increase and you're on a fixed income,
you can't really afford the house.
Yeah, like your income hasn't gone up because they built this place that raised your housing value up. And while, for some people, the increasing housing value is a good thing. I would love my house to increase in value. But if I'm on a fixed income and I don't plan on moving, and now the taxes for my property end up going up, I'm either forced to sell or I lose my house to tax foreclosure.
Right.
Renters, renters are vulnerable too because they just, rental increases push them out.
Right.
So just what you see going on in Raleigh, around the country, I mean, it's not just Raleigh. In most cities where you see a lot, Americans are moving back into cities. We're moving, at first we had this kind of
moving out.
Yeah, we had this rural urban split, and then people started moving from the urban areas to suburbs, and now the suburbs are moving back into the city.
Okay.
And with that, it ends up displacing those lower income residents who just can't compete with, for the housing.
So as a community, how could we be of asset to this as far as community-based businesses, community-based programs, how we have the ability, maybe teaching more job training for the ones that are underemployed or unemployed, or even, like you said, just with low-income households. How do we Are anyone getting involved in that process, or?
I think there's a way to get involved, but a lot of it depends on who you're targeting it to.
Okay.
So, obviously, for individuals who are working who are low income, obviously, it's any kind of job training that would allow them to get a higher paying job would help. But then you still have those individuals who are older, retired on fixed income.
That can't.
Job training doesn't really help them because they're not intending to go back to the workplace.
Okay.
So I really do believe that government policy is really the way to go. And I mean, like I said, government and politics is how I work.
I want you to share that and stress that with the listeners, because so many times I've had conversations with people and they'll say, "Oh, I don't vote," or "I don't believe in the system. I think everything is all broken. I can't do anything to fix it."
Yeah.
You know, and they're the ones that usually complain the most about stuff.
They're the ones who end up being disenfranchised the most. I mean, when they choose not to vote, and like I see everything through a government politics policy lens, and I think that just about all of our major societal problems could be impacted by government policy if we enact a smart policy. And I've been, I've worked on campaigns. I've worked on presidential campaigns. I've worked on campaigns at the municipal, county, state level. I ran for office myself.
So you know the ins and outs.
I know the ins and outs. I mean, I've been very active within the Democratic Party in Wake County. So I know the ins and outs and how things work and how things should work if we were involved. The problem is that we are rarely involved. So I said, I worked on a municipal race. I was campaign manager for a city council candidate. And, when we won, I kind of did an autopsy of how the election went. We had 11% voter turnout in the city. So we're a city of almost 500,000 people, and we had 11% voter turnout. So I mean, 89% of Raleigh is being governed by, people that they didn't vote for, and didn't choose to vote for. And among African Americans, it dropped to 8%. So I mean,
you want to get angry?
Yeah, like you can't get angry at the state of our city or the state, because if you ignore what's been going on with city council, with mayor race, that's who control. And I think that as African Americans especially, we have a tendency to focus on the top level races. We look at who the president is. We may look at who the governor is. And the problem is that the people who directly impact your life and have the most impact on your life, they're your local races, they're your city council, they're your county commission, they're your sheriffs. I mean, people who get upset about police brutality. Well, your police chief is appointed by the city council, who you elect. So, I mean, if you don't like who's there, you can elect somebody. People, the district attorney doesn't try officers who do, who abuse their authority. Well, your district attorney is elected. We just had an election. If you didn't vote, then you can get upset, but you didn't change the people who are in power. The people who are in power change those policies. And I think that people tend to get burned out by the system. And I mean, I will say, there's a lot to follow. I mean, like I said, this is my world. This is what I live in. So, I do this every day. And I know it's overwhelming.
Well, that was going to say it's confusing for me, and that's why a lot of times I ask for clarification. Like, just recently attending a town hall meeting, I thought it was so essential for me, and actually having my children go to the town hall meeting just to see how business is actually conducted. And so,
and I think that's the other aspect that we, especially the African American community, miss out on, is that we vote, and then we think that we're done. Like, okay, we put this person in power. Now let me just go ahead and go back to what I was doing and ignore them until next election cycle. Then I'll come back and kind of try to see if I can reassess what they've done and see if I want to vote for them again. We have a lot of power and authority, and even outside of the election. I mean, if we show up at these meetings, if we express our displeasure at things that are going on, it has the ability to change minds and change policy. So I think that, going to a school board meeting, going to a city council meeting, going to a county commission, they're open to the public. And when you go there, you look around.
You have your opportunity to actually express.
You have the opportunity to go there. You have the opportunity to speak. So I mean, if you have any issues, you need to go. If you're concerned about what's going on in the schools, you can go to the county to the school board meeting. You can sit down. You can speak. And you can get information and get answers. But I think that we miss out on that opportunity. We show up on election day and say, I'm mad at you because you didn't do this.
That's right.
But we never did anything in the 2 or 4 years that they're in office.
Right, that in-between period.
Exactly.
Not holding them accountable for what they said on election day or whatever.
Yeah.
During the campaign.
And so I think, and even if controversial policies come up, I mean, if we mobilize and we express our displeasure at the time, we can avoid them from passing that, unpopular, measure, and hopefully save the heartache on the back end because we intend to be reactionary.
Right.
So, I mean, for example, in Florida, we all know about the stand your ground law that became the big part of the trade. When they debated that bill, there were a couple of people who said, hey, this is the outcome that it could cause.
Right.
But, it was only 1 or 2 voices who said that. They ignored it, they passed it anyways. And then when you have a George Zimmerman doing exactly what they warn people, hey, this is what this law could do, not everybody wants to get up and oh, that's a terrible law, if we weren't that active when they were contemplating it, we probably could have stopped them from passing it.
From the beginning.
Exactly. So
then there's laws on the book, from my understanding, that shouldn't be, but they've never been removed or anything of that nature. And
I think that, sometimes they're just unconstitutional. If you look at our North Carolina State Constitution, we still have a literacy test on the back. We still have a literacy test in our Constitution saying you've got to pass a literacy test to be able to vote. Now, it's unconstitutional because the Supreme Court says it is, but that's still in North Carolina. It's still on the North Carolina Constitution. Same thing. Any candidate who wants to run for office has to declare a belief in God. It's not constitutional because we are here. But if you look at this, they've just never been removed, but they're still there.
So is it important on a state level to get those things removed? Although they're already,
They don't really have an impact right now. I mean, I think that, if there was a chance that the Supreme Court would overrule those decisions and say, oh yeah, you can have, that all candidates need to declare a belief in God in order to run for office, then we need to go back and reassess. But I don't think there's any danger of the Supreme Court saying that. I don't think there's any danger of the Supreme Court bringing back a literacy test.
Okay.
I think one thing you see, regardless of what your views are on abortion rights, you see a lot of states going to kind of codify the holding from Roe v. Wade because they think that there's going to be a change in the Supreme Court on how they rule that. So they're trying to put that in law now so that if there is a change, okay, well, either there's a change, saying that these things are allowable. We've already put our laws in place to make sure that, the status quo resumes.
So let's take a shift here in regards to re-entry programs in regards to Wake County or even North Carolina as a whole. We have in Wake County, in the Wake County area, we have so many we have, I think, 4 prisons. And so about 4 prisons in the area. And one of the things we also we want to be able, once people leave and re-enter into the community, be able to be productive and stay productive. Do you see where there's some hiccups in regards to that, or are we moving in,
There are plenty of hiccups. I think that one thing we've seen is that I'm happy to see is this whole movement in criminal justice reform.
Okay.
We're starting to see some changes in how we viewed it. I mean, you look at most of the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, there was kind of this tough on crime thing where members of both parties, Democrats, Republicans, nobody wanted to be painted as soft on crime.
Right.
And so, I think we put in these very, very onerous, really punitive, if you do this, we're going to drop the hand, we're going to punish you to the fullest extent. And then I think for 2 different reasons. I think that from a social standpoint, people said, hey, this isn't the best way to do this. And I think from a lot of the fiscal conservatives, from that standpoint, this is expensive. We're paying $40,000 to incarcerate somebody every year. After a certain point,
you're getting kind of tired.
Yeah, this money can go somewhere else. They're not really giving back to society. Well, this is money we're paying for these people who aren't giving back to society. And so I think you're starting to see a little bit more trying to be smart on crime.
Okay.
So I think that you're starting to see more programs allowing people to be able to get degrees in schools. I like to see more of that, but I think it's not as, I won't say, kind of career killing as it was in the past. And in the past, if you had a politician say, hey, we need to put some community college credits in prisons, everybody's kind of headed towards, oh, you're solving crime. But I think that, doing that, making sure that individuals are able to get some kind of substance abuse training, if they're suffering from any kind of substance abuse, that they're able to get that kind of treatment while they're incarcerated.
Right.
I think that the move to try to allow, for a ban the box, so that individuals who are, so that employers aren't asking you, are you a felon? They still have the right to do a background check after the interview, but you still have a right chance to distinguish yourself as a candidate and a quality candidate before they just kick your resume out. I think that the move in the housing sector, as far as not relying on a criminal record as being automatically disqualified
for housing.
For housing, yeah.
Because you need somewhere to live.
And I think that was the problem, was that we had so many barriers put up that even after these people were released, there was still, you can't find a place to live, you can't find a place to work, What do you do other than go back to what got you in prison in the first place? Right. And so I think we're starting to evolve on that. And I think that, I think they did a study, and it was primarily about sex offenders, but you had the sex offender registry saying, you had to live outside of 500, yards from a school, a church, a playground, all of that. And I think somebody sued and basically did an overlay of the city. Says if you put that, there's like literally no place in the city for me to live. Like everything is 500 yards from a school or something. Like I can't live anywhere. Right. So I think that one thing is criminals are not a very sympathetic group politically.
Right.
Obviously,
because of what they've endured during.
Well, I think that we tend to treat this idea, you are responsible for where you put yourself. You're not sympathetic group politically as, obviously kids, single women. I think they're a little bit more palatable when it comes to political issues. Right. But, trying to do things on behalf of individuals who are incarcerated, it's never been popular because they've never been a popular group. Right. But I think that now that we realize kind of what we've done with our criminal justice system, we're basically, keeping people from being reintegrated in society. Right. And I think when you look at the criminal justice system, I think that there are three major goals. And the goals don't always coexist. We either want to punish people, we want to rehabilitate people, and we just want to get dangerous people away from the general population. Okay. Like, we just don't want murderers and rapists, running around the city. Right. We need to remove people. Right. And I think that it's hard to accomplish all three goals at the same time. We've been on such a punishment bend that we haven't been able to rehabilitate, And when you look at what other countries do, they really just kind of separate people from society, rehabilitate them, and then allow them to go back into society. But right now, any kind of criminal record is kind of a big red mark on your record. And so we also do expungement work. In North Carolina, we've reduced the barrier as far as getting expungement.
Oh, good.
Whereas before, you needed to wait 15 years after a crime in order to get the record expunged. Now I believe it's 7 years based on those crimes. So,
I think I was just reading about I think she's the district attorney or mayor in Baltimore. I do believe it's the district attorney in Baltimore said they're not going to charge people for marijuana. Right. And they said that it's like growing like astronomical numbers, over 5,000 people alone, like just off the top of the list. Yeah. That's a lot of people. Yeah, I think the decriminalization of some things. I think, we've seen states go to this decriminalization of marijuana like it's not this danger that it was painted as back in the 60s. Right. And so, I think we need to kind of reassess some things that are on our books, things that I think they're more ethically frowned upon other than whether or not it's actually smart policy. Okay. So I think marijuana is kind of a big one. I think prostitution is another one that you could say, hey, look, if this is how somebody chooses to make their money, as long as we put some policies in place to make sure that they're safe, that they're not, danger, any kind of public health issues as far as STDs, whether it be licensing or taxing, mandatory, testing. That's interesting. But it's not a popular policy because, again, most politicians who present it, you're just trying to get some prostitutes. Right. Like, no, that's not really the case. Like, just from what we spend on incarcerating those individuals. Like, we could be doing something else with that money. And I think that, if we're trying to protect the groups that we're trying to protect, the way we're doing it is just not effective. Right.
So, for instance, I don't want to go down a whole tangent on this,
right.
but for instance, the federal government kind of passed some new laws around sex trafficking online.
Right.
And so, if anybody,
you're kind of dancing around this situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, people, if you know, Tumblr, where they basically said we're removing all, sex. But the problem is that individuals who engage in sex work, like, who do like the video chats, who do the prostitutions, you're actually putting them more in harm's way because you're driving them back underground. So that's when you start having traffickers. That's when you start having
pimps. It becomes a little bit more malicious.
Yeah, I mean, you start having people try to take advantage of people doing that. If it was out in the public, if it was open, if you required licensing, if you required testing, if you required taxes, like individuals who wanted to engage in that work, they could do so, and they could do so protected. Right. Now, if you drive it underground, people who are trafficked or anything like that, rape victims aren't going to come forward because they were engaging in illegal activity. Right. People who are sex trafficking individuals, forcing them into this lifestyle, like they have no recourse. They can't go to the police because they feel like they're doing something. Right. So I think that, when we look at how our laws are structured, we need to look at what's important, what's not important, what's the effect that we want to have. And
I'm glad you shed some light on that, because some people think that, everything's just wrong. They don't see the in-between. It's important to see the black and white first, too, and see the foundation of why this is occurring in the community.
Policy is always, I love policy just because it is very, very nuanced. It's very, very in the weeds. I know a lot of people get bored about it, but I mean, it's what I love to do. And actually, when I graduated from law school, I went back to Southeast Raleigh. They had a law and justice class, and I volunteered with them.
Well, that's good. That's important.
One of the exercises I had with them was I'd have them sit down and I'd have them write out a statute, and I'd say, outlaw rape or outlaw, make self-defense illegal. Like, when is it okay? And I had them write out the statute, what they thought, And then I just run through scenarios, and I make them as wild as possible. And I say, under your law, is that self-defense?
Right.
Is that self-defense? Oh, well, no, that's what? Look at your law. Under your law, like I said, practically we say no. That is not so. Right. Under your law, it is. Right. So when you start crafting policy, like you need to make it specific enough so that you don't have to be there and judge every situation that it applies to. But you also want to make it broad enough that it covers the situations you're trying to intend. And I think that right now we have a disconnect in that we say some things that sound good, but when you look at what it actually does on the ground, it just doesn't have that impact.
In closing, what would you say as an African American male, myself as raising African American boys to become men, what advice would you give to them? What encouragement would you give to them right now in this day and age?
Ooh, that's a touchy question.
I know it kind of hits home because you are, and I'm pretty much sure you lived it in some way, shape, or form. And I constantly come in contact with boys, even if they're just at my house eating peanut butter and jelly sandwich, to the fact that, if someone may need some tutoring or even need a letter of recommendation or need a family member needs help or what have you, because their son is in trouble that they didn't think they would be in. So
I would say, lean on, what your parents instill in you as far as right and wrong. I think that the problem that our young boys face, especially our young African American boys, is there's kind of this culture that's, and this perception of what we are. And I think that sometimes we tend to try to fit that stereotype, or we try to push ourselves to fitting that stereotype when it's not us. Right. And so, I would say, growing up, I was teased, oh yeah, you're acting white for doing well in school and stuff.
I was trying to do the right thing.
That's just who I was. Like, I wasn't out there trying to do some of the things that, the people who were making fun of it, I wasn't out there trying to do that stuff. And, I look at where I am now and where they are now, and, it's part of because, and luckily I had a strong support system to lean on to basically, reinforce, look, you do have value, you do have worth, you're doing the right thing, keep moving in the right direction. And I think that a lot of our young African American boys, they lack that. They don't have a positive role model. Their society's basically told them who they are, and they're trying to live up to it. And without those positive role models saying, no, you are special, you are smart, you are talented, live in your truth.
Right.
They tend to gravitate towards the things.
You don't have to gangbang to be popular.
Yeah, they try to gravitate towards the things that make you popular, and popularity isn't necessarily always good, depending on what you're popular for.
Okay.
So I would say, most of our African American boys, they grow up in households that with, strong parents who try to push them towards right and wrong. And unfortunately, there's so much in the world that just kind of beat them. So I think my advice, if I had to boil it down, is look at your surroundings, look at who's out there really invested in you for you. Right. Versus who's trying to push you into being popular or, in those short-term, gains or benefits, but look at who's out there for you, the long term, who's willing to sacrifice for you, who's willing to, go to the yard for you, who's willing to, support you, push you. Those are the people you want to surround yourself with. Those are the people whose opinions really matter.
That's a very good point. Very good point. And I appreciate your time. Got one more question for you though.
Yes, ma'am.
Who's your favorite civil rights leader? This is, of course, this is Black History Month.
Yes, it is.
So
I'm going to go a little bit down the new path. John Hamilton Houston.
Okay.
He was the dean of Howard Law School. He actually trained Thurgood Marshall and a lot of civil rights leaders that came out of Howard. He was basically the one who put the plan together that ultimately became Brown versus Board. Okay. He was one of the first NAACP civil rights attorneys. He was a brilliant attorney. Wow. He trained a generation of attorneys.
And that's why you're an attorney.
I don't know if that's why I'm an attorney, but the groundwork he laid, he really was kind of the godfather of civil rights litigation. Like everybody who came after him, like I said, whether you talk about Julius Chambers, when you talk about Thurgood Marshall, it was based off of what he built.
Wow. Well, tell us how we can reach out to you. Share with our listeners how they can contact you, whether it be social media, whatever the case may be.
Yes, so you can reach out to me. I do a kind of semi-weekly Facebook Live podcast on Antoine Marshall for Policy on Facebook. So you can find me, Antoine, Antoine, Marshall on Policy. Okay. I talk about, federal issues, what's going on in politics from federal level, state level, sometimes city and county level. Okay. If you are trying to reach me for a speaking engagement, or if you're trying to reach me for any kind of legal counsel, whether it be landlord-tenant law, estate planning, bankruptcy, or if you're one of those individuals who've been impacted by Hurricane Florence, you can reach me at 919-526-0725.
And this information, by the way, for our listeners, will be in our little blurb spiel, so we'll definitely have that out there for you guys.
Thank you again for having me.
Oh, not a problem. It's a pleasure to have you. Thanks again. Thanks for being on Brown Girl Table Talk.
Not a problem.